Okay.
Oh, fantastic! You got a beer to go along with that?
Mail it to California, please.
All right.
I finished the beer during the weekend. Sorry.
Well, just let it ride.
All right, guys. The live stream is up, and we are gonna go straight into this. Oh wait, I gotta get.
What channel are we linking from?
Hey,
hold on.
hey,
Announcements?
you never responded to my for you.
Oh my
yeah, I'm
goodness.
kind of busy at the moment, mate.
How do I turn off the
No.
channel noise?
Just it's gonna subside eventually, I think.
Who is
But
that?
anyway, Omni, Admiral, you guys both there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Omni, you are an imperialistic player, right?
Yep.
Admiral, you are militaristic.
Correct.
What do you think are the key differences that these roles have played on your influence status today? Admiral, if you could go first.
Well, I think as a militaristic player, I have a little bit easier access to more balanced resources. I don't need as many brokers. So resources have not really been a problem for me. But, I mean, I've got a bunch of Natasha furs active, and I'm still good on resources, but I just can't beat the expedited station and all the accelerants that amounts to.
What about, so you think that the expedited stations will outweigh the influence always?
I mean, I respect Omni's capabilities, and so, tit for tat, the expedited stations give him a huge. Now, I'm assuming he's using them, but I mean, it gives him these huge boosts. Just when I think, just when I have him beat, he goes like 200 points ahead of me. And
So what do you think, Omni? You think maybe the ship assemblies and those buildings that give you 50 influence? You think that's the case here, or is it just the expedited station?
Expedited stations help, and then plus Imperial has the 5% reduction in building cost. So you put those two together with the Natasha. So I'm getting an expedited station that starts with innate speed reduction because the command center's a higher level to start, plus Natasha, and I get the natural 5% cost reduction, which means that I can just nonstop pump out ships, assuming I'm able to request data.
So are you able to keep up Natasha Fair on multiple stations currently in the game?
Yeah, I lucked out. I've been doing so many missions that I had 4 Natashas that I just found from chests. So I have 3 active right now. I think one of them just...
What about you, Admiral? How many do you have active?
Let's see here. I have 1, 2, 3. I just popped my 3rd Natasha for on now. But usually I kept 1, and then I just popped 2 more on today.
And you think you're not going to have any problems keeping them up?
No, I don't think I will.
Okay.
With ESA wearing off and the viability of plunder and the amount of people who've essentially quit the game at this point, I don't. Between me doing plunder for raiding and at the same time running solar flares, resources have not been an issue for me. But it's a very active playstyle. I mean, I attribute very little to the passive resource generation, even though that's what I've been focusing on building.
Okay, so here's a pop quiz for both of you. Omni, if you go first. How much combined crystal, gas, and metal does your best station produce an hour?
With runes and characters, or without?
What is your current best station?
Like
you add up the hard
log
resources.
in to see it, but my best station
by memory
is around 9.
Surely without runes is a better measure.
So I have my total production's at 26,000 an hour between a couple stations.
26k an hour, empire wide.
Yeah, empire wide. Yeah.
What do you think your passive generation is, Admiral?
Empire wide?
Yeah.
Oh God.
If we may be so bold as to inquire.
Let's
if you're
see
logged
here.
in, you can check your tasks, and there's a task that shows you how much your production is.
Oh really? Where's that at? Which one? Where's that at? Empire or general?
I can't remember, but it's like produce X resources per hour, and you can actually see.
Oh, that's a cool tip, man. Let me see if I can find it.
So while you're looking for that, Omni, do you think are there any top 10 Maki players? Do we know? Do you think that the Maki player is lagging behind, or is he just kind of waiting until he's called upon?
Yeah, from input that I've received from my corp mate or my alliance mates, the Maki, at least up until the late game, really doesn't have that much to do because the scanners of your station scanner is level 5, and when you have the scanning building leveled up, it's just as strong pretty much as a Maki fully spec'd scanning fleet. So I feel like they are missing a niche that early game to do something other than high level scouting missions.
Yep, I
Did you
agree.
find that total number, Admiral?
I don't know which branch it's in. I'm still looking for
Might
it.
be under
It's
operations.
in the first tab. It's in summary, near the bottom.
Nope, it's not
Admiral,
there. It's not going to be in summary.
Admiral, I'm sorry for interrupting. It's under Empire.
Ah, thank you. All right, give me a second. There are a lot here.
It's called produce X resources per hour.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to measure it.
Okay. So, I am at. What did you say you were at, Omni?
Like
26K.
I'm at 20,726, but now ask me about labor.
How much labor do you have, Admiral?
A little over 12,000. How about you, Omni?
Yeah, I think I have 8,000 total.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that takes into account full conversion or near full conversion, though, right? That because
no.
it's the highest your labor has ever been is what the achievement will say, I think.
Actually, I don't know. Let me find out right now. What happens if I convert all my resources to labor?
So, was there for you, Omni? Was there like some early path policies that you took early game but have now abandoned? Are you seeing choices for the early game and the late game? Do you mind telling us about it?
Sure, no problem. I started off with solar flares, the solar flare policies, because those obviously are just so beneficial. But now that competition has picked up in Fornax, I've actually spec'd out of the solar flares completely. Because my fleets are large, so I can almost one-shot it even without the policy, and there's more competition, so it's less reliable. And I spec'd into actually missions to help me get to level 5 missions, because as an Imperial, you're not having a high priority on producing corvettes first. So I'm making sure that my patrol ships and frigates are able to help me do level 5s.
Okay. What about you, Admiral? Have you let go of any early military policies for something better?
Nope. I actually I got the plunder to plunder 4, and then I've just gone straight down the middle. Beyond that, I'm building ships at a 10% reduced amount of time, and that's about it. Oh, actually, now I made my fleets just more powerful with hit points and firepower in PvP.
Oh yeah. So it's obvious you're beelining for something.
Yeah, I mean, only 3 things so far, and the rest of the points are down the middle. So.
Okay, 12k labor and nothing but firepower and build speeds. Interesting. So, how many achievements or tasks have you guys completed?
A lot. I can't actually see right now. I'm pretty close to getting, I think, the 600 achievement.
Oh wow.
Oh really?
Achievement.
Wow.
I think I'm close to that if I recall.
Let's see here.
'Cause
I'm
I
close
have
to the
4
500.
corporations. Gotcha. Or maybe I'm close to 500. I can't see it, so I can't remember. I know it's pretty high though, and I'm close.
How would you prioritize your achievements order of operations in the early game, Omni?
Admiral will probably be better to answer this. I kind of went a weird path. My objective was to get corporations up as fast as possible. So my growth pattern was pretty suboptimal. The corporation buildings are very expensive and take a long time, and they don't really give a lot of influence return rate. However, I wanted to get our alliance station up first, basically. So that didn't really help my path at all.
So do you think there are some valid trade-offs, influence for some other effect that you kind of are forced to make or have to see an advantage in taking in the early game? Or would you just recommend going for influence completely?
Typically, I mean, early game, prioritizing influence and resource generation are your two primary concerns, because the more influence that you have, the faster you're going to level up, and the faster you hit those level barriers, the more stations you can put down, which increases your economy. And then
yeah,
the
but like I know there are people that love to just beeline for the production buildings because of the resource achievements that are associated with taking all 4 up to level 10, and just establishing a base income of resources for the station.
So those resource generation buildings are the last things that I'm taking to 10 in terms of resource generation. So I think the priority would be you want to get survey up to 10 pretty quickly because of the +1 range. That's pretty huge. That's actually gigantic. And then because you need all 3 of the production buildings at each tier to hit that achievement, it's not efficient at all to aim for those achievements specifically, or to aim for those tasks specifically, because getting those production buildings to level 10, you have to do 3 of them to level 10 just to get the achievement.
Is this closed shop? Can anyone join in?
I'm kind of interviewing these two at the moment, but we'll
Sorry, okay.
Later. So what about you, Admiral? How would you have prioritized your building path in the beginning? Or how did you?
In the beginning, let's see, I prioritized achievement rewards. So what that meant was, I went 1 level on each building that was not built. Then I went to Command Center 6. Then I built Smelting Plant 2. Then Command Center 7 upgraded the station, built 1 level of each building with 3 points in one tree and 3 points in another tree to get the tree completion achievement rewards. Then I also got ships for that, and then later on at some point I deconstructed one building, and I built a level in the 3rd tree to get more ships. I should say, after upgrading the station, getting some more achievement rewards, I went straight for Command Center 10. After that, it was mostly focusing up Tier 1 buildings like the smelting plant and the shipyard. Keeping my around that time, I really started keeping my ship queues full indefinitely. And then after that, I started working Tier 1.
So how long have your ship queues been working non-stop?
Basically since I got Command Center 10 on my first station. That's really when I started to keep my ship queues completely full.
That is impressive. What was your first station's build?
What's that?
What was the first station, the one you began with? What was its build? How did you build it? Which path did you take the admins?
Well, it is let's see, 2, 6, 9.
So 2 in the military path, 6 in the domain, and 9 in industry.
Correct.
So mining colony and TGI.
Yes.
How helpful has TGI been?
Oh man, it's not great in the early game compared to other companies, but it's a great long-term investment. It's a great empire-wide resource management station. And
what about you, Omni? What was your first?
My first station is a disaster.
Did you have to change it?
Yeah, I changed it. I first went 9 points in industry, and I actually had to switch that out into 9 points in domain for a different corporation. My starting, sorry, I'm lagging a little bit. My starting station has 3 labor nodes as my starter, so specializing specifically in resource harvesting wasn't the most effective path.
Okay. So, Omni, what is your least used UI?
Can you rephrase that question?
Yeah, like which UI in the game do you use the least? Like,
Standard, exploration, resource, political.
Oh, gotcha. My least used is probably the first one, the standard. I don't think I ever use it. I pretty much hang out only in exploration, and then switch to political if I happen to be raiding someone to make sure I don't accidentally shoot.
what
Wow.
about you?
I couldn't be more polar opposites. My least used would be political, with my most used being standard.
Hello.
Interesting. Hello there. Have a seat.
Is there coffee? I need
uh,
coffee.
has either of you ever crafted a crux?
No.
No.
Would you ever craft a crux?
Nope.
I might consider it in the early game. We're talking day 1. There is an award, or I should say, an achievement reward for crafting your first rune. But
for the task.
yeah, basically.
Okay. So, in a orderly fashion, has anybody got a question for Omni or Admiral?
I've got one.
Shoot.
So, Admiral, so your beginning strategy was to basically follow the achievement line, get up those resources, and then start going your own path, correct?
No, I mean, I kind of had a line in mind, so I did very little deconstructing. But yeah, I mean, I really wanted to maximize on achievement rewards right off the bat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, you kind of have to focus on achievement rewards early to sustain your growth right off the bat. It's just free resources that you really. The time, like people spamming time cards early are going to soon run out of resources if they're not specifically targeting the tasks to get more resources.
Well put.
Not going to disagree with Omni, but question one of the things you said. You said you don't touch your production buildings till late on because of the problems of how much it costs you to get to level 10. I do the same as you, but I tend to do the first station. I take refineries to 10, then stop. Then on the second station, I take conveyors to 10.
Oh, that's clever.
That's a very smart move. I think you'll find one interesting difference between Omni and I is that I am not focusing on companies at all. I'm not really interested in that early race for first alliance station, because if I can't utilize that company and the benefits of it right away, then why am I building it up? No, I'd sooner build up basic production before that, basic labor, and any other building I need after that before establishing a company, if I don't need the benefits of the company.
Yeah, the 3 of my companies are directly impactful for what I was looking for. I have 2 of the mining colony field harvest companies, whatever, it's like 20% per level. And then I have the freighter company, because that one is incredible. I can't stress enough how important freighters are throughout the entire game. If you have a surplus of resources in one station, being able to ship that to another station to either just hold on to those resources or to balance out disparities is invaluable. That's one of the reasons why I've been able to keep my building queues non-stop pretty much the entire time, other than right now because I can't log in.
So how much part of your building success would you take to resource management like that?
Well, let me put it this way: I've already gotten the 2 million achievement for transferring resources.
Okay, so pretty important.
Yeah, so it's mandatory. Basically, anytime I have freighters available, I'm using them to balance out resources.
So, has either of you bombed a player off the map?
Nope.
I have blown up an NPC, but not a player.
But not a player.
No, I'm next to Altag, and he'll kill me if I kill a player.
So you're both little Care Bears.
Hey, are you volunteering to be the first, Snookums? Because I'm sure we'll
over,
both be glad to.
I know you're gonna love losing those augments.
I have a question to ask.
Yep.
You guys have both been really candid about your development. I know this is an alpha, but as a new player, I see something like interference, and I know that there's also ways to hide stuff in your base. What type of things do you try to conceal, as far as just how much concealment of in-game strategy comes into play with your development of your empire?
Admiral, if you go first.
Oh, okay. You can answer.
Honestly, I've shared way more than I should have. I've basically been an open book to anyone who's asked. I try to not share everything, but as you can see, even in my stream right now, I've shared some pretty important information. Much to the disbenefit of my alliance. So yeah, just ask me or just watch my streams. You'll learn about my playstyle, my builds, my outpost locations, etc. So yeah, I have a pretty distinct disadvantage.
So what about you, Omni? What will you not like? It's a difficult question to ask. So what would you not want to share with people? Like what type of information? Like
I mean, the only thing I wouldn't share really is our attack plans or anything, expansion plans. Just because that's the competitive part of the game. But in terms of base building, it's like until the very late game, it's going to be hard, or the mid to late game, it's going to be hard to attack people in different sectors. It's kind of a waste. So from my mentality, I'd rather have people gain information from myself and Admiral and other players so that they can continue to play through the end game, so then I can shoot them then. It's not fun shooting people at Area FK.
Yeah, I'm not worried about people taking advantage of what they know about my game, because I'd rather people just become good at use what they learn, not as an advantage over attacking me, but as an advantage of becoming good at the game.
So I mean, you do know that intersector warfare is quite possible and desirable sometimes even.
Yeah, but is it very early going?
No, it doesn't happen just yet. But you could have people right now that have level 5 Navy bases and could go across the map.
You also have to weigh the costs and benefits of that, though. If I could just add, step in for a second. It's you have to make sure that the person that you're attacking, you can where all their outposts are, where all their, make sure you have scans on all those outposts, so then you can go sabotage them with your Machia player. And a lot of Machia players don't even have the sabotage potential right now, especially if, their outpost is at level 5 or something like that. And then you have to coordinate with attackers and all that kind of stuff. It's a bit difficult at the moment to go and, commit to a war without both sides losing a lot.
All right.
I've got a question for Omni.
Okay, interesting.
Omni, what's your prestige per hour?
It's about to be 20, I think, today.
Ah, nice. Okay.
Follow up, Admiral. Don't leave us hanging.
If you're watching the stream, you'll know.
What is yours?
Probably about 30.
25.8, and that's going to go up soon.
That's really nice, man. 23.2 over here. And all those lovely numbers, guys. Let's thank Admiral Omni for being so open about their strategies. Hopefully it won't come back to haunt you guys. We know things are going to change drastically in the coming weeks anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, when we are by questions, who do you think is your biggest competition except each other?
I mean, I put little weight on the individual player ranking. I put more weight on the alliance ranking, to be honest.
I'm the same. Yeah, it's not an individual player. Any single individual player, no matter how much time or money they spend on the game, can be taken out by 2 non-paying members that are active. So one player by themselves can't do too much, but an alliance that's working together, that's helping each other, that's giving each other information, they're going to be infinitely stronger than a handful of the top players.
Yeah, well, one single player can make a difference, but yes, definitely teamwork can trump a single player indeed. Make friends and make friends fast. If you're not in any kind of active alliance, if you can't join an alliance, sue for peace. Make sure your presence is well known and make some kind of arrangement, because if you don't have something, if you're in Serpens, I mean, you're in my sector, and I don't know about you, and you haven't reached out to me, and I attack you, I'm gonna wipe you. I've done it to over 20 players so far, and most of them haven't really come back. And and I'm not trying to brag, but that means you really need to make friends. I actually whelped, not fully whelped, but mostly whelped one of my smaller fleets due to an accident, really. But the guy was actually active, and where he had looked inactive, and he took advantage.
Sorry, I was going to make an earlier point. After you'd broken up, was that they have given a lot away, but what they're talking about is idealized situations. If you get players who've come up against a res wall or in a very crowded area, the demands and what you need to do change dramatically.
Yeah, it's true.
So I have a question. Do you guys, when you first initially plan a game, do you set it up so that each of you will start off in a different sector so you don't have to do any sort of competition?
Well, I can answer that side for Singularity. We initially were going to go with a 3-sector setup where we were going to have all of our people split. And after some internal debating, we settled on the current setup where it was 2-to-1. And of course, we could see what happened with Admiral, so we had to expand it back out to 3. But yeah, we had it was not planned between any of us outside of within our own alliances. And if we dropped on top of any other big alliances like the old crew, like Baka, like Crash the Desktop, if we had dropped on top of any of them, it would have been a real hard fought sector, because everyone wants to be the leader. You can't always have that. So, as you can see, I would be remiss to not talk about the people down in Sagita. They evidently have their own style of doing things, and there's only one person who can end up leading Confederacy. So, it's up to you whether you want to fight hard to win that Confederacy and set everyone in the sector behind, or if you just want to assimilate and join another group.
Evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
So do we have any more questions for Omni or Admiral?
I do have another one. So
Sure.
My second question is, what is the timeline that you see based upon the current game that hostilities will start? And do you think that timeline itself is too long? Should they start sooner? Should they start?
Define hostilities. I'm sorry.
Hostilities, 1 within the actual sector itself, and then 2 with the friction between the sector combat on. So it's like a 2-part question.
I'll start, I guess, before I lag out. I think it's going to kick off in the next week or so. People are starting to get heavy ships. They're establishing footholds in their own sector. So if you have another alliance in your sector that you haven't already worked out an arrangement with, meaning one of you is determined to become the coalition leader, then you're probably going to have to, show some force to make sure that one of you is determined to be that leader. And then you're going to want to start positioning yourselves to defend your sector, because if you're not thinking about, in a week or two, grabbing the points of the GTs on the edges of the sector soon, then you're going to be at a major disadvantage when it comes to trying to actually capture them and secure them.
What do you think, Admiral?
To answer your question, intra-sector warfare started the day ESA wore off in my sector. Since then, there was only one other alliance that was remotely competitive in our sector, and I'm proud to say we have completely obliterated them. Of the remaining active players in that alliance, they have since joined ours, and we now currently lay claim to the entire sector of serpents.
So you went to war right away to establish dominance?
Yeah, first thing I did was I smashed the alliance leader who refused to join us. I tried really hard. There was not any kind of death threats. I expressed to him how great we could be together, and he just, for some reason, he just couldn't say yes. And so I smashed him. Day one of ESA wearing off, and he really kind of gave up after that. Not day one. It was more like day 3 after ESA wore off, something like that. But it was really early. In any case, after that, the chain of command basically broke down in that alliance. And
so, what do you see intersector warfare starting to come into the picture?
Intersector warfare, I think, is probably gonna be at least. Oops, sorry. Hold on a second. At least 1 to 2 months from now.
Oh, you think so far away?
I think probably a month and a half, if not 2 months.
Are you assuming that people are going to be allowed to build their ASs without any interference?
I think that titanium is a real hindrance. I think that people...
What are you talking about? I have a lot of titanium.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so you're talking about titanium because of the cost of building up the navy base.
Yeah, I think that.
So the alliance that does that certainly has an advantage in the early game. It can attack while other people can't attack back.
But I think there will be enough imperialistic players to defend any early hammer, potentially, and I think the risk of whelping is too high. There may be some early
recruitment faster, and he has the fake attacks.
Yeah, so I think there may be some early like maybe around week 4, week 5 or 6 intersector, but the real combat's going to be much later than that, in my opinion.
You were saying, Omni?
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say that my perspective is that you want to, like I said earlier, you want to kind of avoid wars because everyone's going to lose unless you are fighting over a specific objective. But my mentality is that in the next week or two, alliances should be targeting those GTs that are at the borders between themselves and the next sector. Not necessarily taking those over, but positioning themselves to be able to quickly grab those once the wars kick off. And if two alliances are both doing that from the same side, you probably don't want to just look at each other and wave and wait. You want to put yourself at an advantage against that alliance. So it just depends on your situation. Some people won't see a war for a month, and some people that are preparing for the border warfare will probably kick off the next week.
Interesting. So you guys okay to continue?
Yeah, but the thing is,
I kind of sprung this trap on you. Are you guys okay to continue?
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to add one more thing. Like, the only justifiable reason to go to like a full-scale war right now is if you're fighting for position for the GTs, for the objectives. If you're just going to war with someone just to go to war, it's a big loss for you. The defenders won't really have to lose as much because it'll take less time for them to position defenses. But your fleets that are attacking someone across the sector, even with Navy Base 5, they're gone for 16 hours, and not the whole fleet's coming back. So those 16 hours without those fleets, you're missing out on raiding opportunities, on missions, on all those things for really not.
There does come a time, Omni, where you stop raiding for resources. Your stations are just more than self-sufficient.
But it is not this day.
No, but it's not today. That is true.
That's what I'm saying. Like right now, unless you're specifically targeting an objective that you will need, then going to a full-scale war at this time is you're kind of losing if you do that.
Well, I think you could theoretically play the entire alpha just raiding and solar flaring and passive generating resources, and you could actually be a huge contribution in that regard. It really comes down to your playstyle. If for the normal player, I would rarely recommend engaging in early PvP, but if you played right and you have a massive armada, or you've got an ally who's using his armada to wipe out enemy fleets, you can use those to raid. I can't tell you how many spy reports I've looked at over the past, week. And I will say that, I took an early risk by sending out, 1 or 2 fleets to wipe out the enemy alliance leader, because I wanted to destroy his morale before his fleets grew too big.
So there's definitely micro targets in between.
Yeah.
So creating space for an alliance member or yourself, forcing submission from a group of players to join your alliance, like that one. It'll be interesting to see what happened when you guys have to go toe to toe.
Hey, Omni.
Pay heed to anybody else.
Why do we have to go toe to toe, man? We could just be allies for this alpha.
Wait, I thought we were in the same coalition together.
Yeah, we should just find out who the devs are and just let's just throw this game and just wipe out the devs. What do you think?
I think that's a terrible idea.
Admiral, if you do that, I have a reward for you. I'll buy you beer.
What happens if we just recruit the top 100 players to smash every station holding a GT and a line station? And so by the end of the game, nobody holds a GT. Like, what if?
Might be fun for the second server.
One thing I will say about the early game is that Machiavellians, if you're expecting that, you might be kind of bored right now because there's not much kicking off. But Machi players right now, even today, can start sabotaging people in neighboring sectors. You have the advantage of advanced spy reports and being able to sabotage. You're not really, like, you're basically baiting someone, because if you sabotage with some scouts, like a couple outposts, you're going to kind of hinder and annoy people that are in nearby sectors, and your objective should be to try to get them to send fleets your way. They won't be able to blow up your station, but you'll hinder them in the fact that they won't be able to use their fleets for anything else if they decide to come after you. So I think, like, one of the downfalls of Machis is you really need to be prepared to do PvP and like spy work and sabotage. And if that's of interest to you, then you can pretty much kick off immediately, which is nice.
So yeah, there's a little bit of downside there though, because the number of sabotaged outposts is in the rankings, and if you're really aggressive right away, people will kind of figure out it's you real fast.
But if you're nested with friends, Noogums, I mean, in the last pre-alpha, we had Klaus right in the middle of us, and he kicked off on day 8, I suppose, and he was really good.
Yeah, one of our guys is a Machi player, and you can see on the leaderboard he's been sabotaging like every possible fleet, not just to level up his fleets, but to get experience in how it works. And sabotaging isn't something that someone will immediately go to war with you for. It's more of a hindrance. But when you're able to apply that hindrance to 10 members of an alliance, you're doing measurable damage against them without having to go to war, and you're potentially not losing anything if you have good spy reports. So it's one of those things where Maki players, you might not be blowing up their stations, but you're definitely causing issues for them.
It's very fun. Sounds like a fun thing to do.
Yeah, like launch attacks on this guy Two Flower.
Yeah, he be damned.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, how many hours did you guys play each day in average since day one? And how do you guys think the casual player is in a disadvantage, like going to war or in an alliance that is with no like heavy players, heavy time players?
Admiral, you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I would say I have spent a fair amount of time in game, just mostly keeping my ships out raiding and running solar fleet flares and doing missions. I think your second question was it is the more important question, is like how can the casual player keep up kind of deal. I think when I look at the casual player, I also look at the same kind of people who are in my alliance, or who I would want at least in my alliance. If the casual player is logging in a minimum of 3 times, maybe 4 times a day, and managing their queues and their fleets, they're going to get roughly 80 to 85% of the effectiveness of as somebody who's on all the time. And I think that's enough to be an outstanding contributor in the game. I think if you're constantly missing out on daily achievements, I think I think that's a clear indicator of somebody who's falling behind. So the casual player who can get all their dailies done, who can effectively utilize their fleets to prevent from hitting a resource wall, yes, they won't be in the top 10, but as the alpha goes through, they will definitely be a force to be reckoned with when brought together.
Being able to log in is also very useful.
What about you, Omni? How do you see the casual player in the mid and end game?
Well, clearly I've been online a lot because organizing an alliance and loving the game and playing a lot. There's definitely an advantage to being on a lot. You're able to grab solar flares, manage your raiding fleets, those kind of things. But for a casual player, like if you look at the rankings right now, like I'm at over 2,000 influence, which is just a measure of like the number of buildings I have, right? Well, there are players that are casual that have maybe 1,000 influence. They still have 4 bases. I only have 5. And my 5th base is like brand new. So even right now, even though I've been on a ton, my advantage over someone isn't that great, even to a casual player. So, casual players look at the scoreboard of influence and they say, oh, this guy has double my influence. Well, in reality, like I only have 1 more station, and I'm only able to have 1 more, line of ships being produced at the same time. So casual players, as Admiral said, they're at like an 80 to 85% strength level as a player who's on all the time, which you get 2 of those people, 2 casuals, they can almost take out any single player if they coordinate together. So that's the thing with this game, is that you don't need to be online all the time. Like I don't need to be looking at my screen right now. My queues are full. My fleets are on doing stuff, but I just enjoy talking to people and organizing the alliance and everything. And but for casuals, as long as like as Admiral said, you claim your dailies. The dailies are the most important thing. And I definitely think that there should be an auto collect for the dailies when it resets. That'll help the casual players a lot. But yeah, as long as you do like those base things every day and you keep your queues relatively full, you could specialize in doing one thing, whether it be getting minerals for the alliance or just producing defensive ships or something, and have a serious, meaningful impact.
I think there is an advantage with being on all the time. Not being on all the time, I'll change it. To being hardcore, to being on at the right times. You may not be... Just being at the top of the infantry doesn't make you a good player. What it does make you is the player who gets there first. You get the choice of the spots. You get the choice of where you build stuff. That's quite a big advantage. But when it comes down to PvP, I don't think it makes an earthly bit of difference.
You know, I think where I would gauge the strength and true value of a player is not in the influence rankings, but by their fleet size. You know, you could be, you know, the top 3 people under me could, you know, band together, but if they were not, you know, if they were just focusing on developing their resources and not producing fleets, then I would wipe out all 3 of them, even if they did stack their defenses. So, you know, that just goes to show that the best players, you know, don't focus as much on trying to keep up on the, you know, the first week I was on the number 10 slot. That's because I wasn't focused on influence. I was focused on resource production, and I know the math. I know what produces resources and what's the best ROI, my favorite word in this game that everyone knows. Producing ships and using those ships to gather resources is the best return on investment. You know, if you just focus on building ships on every single one of your stations, making sure there's enough labor for all of them, you'll be fine. And honestly, that'll just continue to happen over and over and over. You know, your stations, you'll get some habitation domes in there. You get a ton more labor. I mean, guys, 40 fleets. Do you know how much labor you're going to need?
So
40 labor.
So on that note, do you think that the habitation dome is a contender as your first tier 3 outpost versus the very popular mining colony for your first station? Like if you build the habitation dome and connect 2 stations right from the get-go, that's a few extra units right there.
I would say the answer to that question depends on your starting location, and if there's a good planet near you. So what I did is I rushed influence as fast as possible starting so that I could snipe the grand lava large volcanic planet combo. And then therefore, you know, mining colony was just hands down better for me.
Yeah.
But if you're in a location where there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of active people around you, it's going to be really, really hard to get a good mining colony spot right off the bat. So that answer from my perspective just comes down to what do your surroundings look like?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the Hab Dome I do think is viable because of Admiral's comments. You know, you always want to be pumping ships out, and the more ships that you can have active, you know, you're going to be able to raid more. Those fleets are going to level up, and you can put more ships in those fleets, so they're more effective. So it kind of snowballs from there. It just depends on what your start looks like.
I think that's not completely true if you're in an alliance. If you're an imperialist in the alliance, you should be whacking resources, then producing ships to build for other people. So, labor is not so important.
So early game Hab Dome, I think if you're imperialistic or Machiavellian, that would be a bad idea. I think if you are, I mean, the basic labor buildings is enough to keep you going, especially early game. I think if you're a militaristic player who intends on using their ships very actively, then the habitation dome would have a mediocre value in early game, and I'm talking like, you know, your first station, your second station, kind of early game. At this point, where you now have 4 or 5 stations, I could see a habitation dome having a greater value than a mining colony. Maybe I think the break-even point would be around 3 stations, but if you look at the progression of when you're getting the titanium rods and utilizing them, to maximum effectiveness, it really isn't conducive to habitation domes for an early game. Again, I think it's definitely worth trying. I don't think it's too bad. I think, it's whatever minimal marginal gains that you gain over having a habitation dome over a mining colony, it just increases the amount of work required for that marginal gain. So
one of the other downfalls of the Hab Dome is the corporations for that starting are absolutely awful.
Yeah.
The spy defense or whatever, the sabotage defense, like no one really is going to be sabotaging you early, and even if someone does sabotage you early, it's not that big of a deal.
Wholeheartedly concur, and it will be fixed before the open beta.
And I would say that pretty much always you're going to want your first station to be industrial and your capital. I mean, capital, that's subjective, but at least industrial, because you can put in, if you do make it your capital, you can have 4 mining facilities there. You can card for extended range on all 4 mining facilities. You can put your mining colony down there. You can have an increased range commerce hub. I mean, and that's great. That's great resources per hour right there. Early game resources, that's huge. Now, if you're around a bunch of labor fields, then yeah, maybe you might do something unique like a habitation dome or whatnot. But I was actually considering a first station being a Navy base. As crazy
well,
as that
I'm going to
sounds.
bounce, but the insight's been phenomenal. I'm glad you two decided to do this. Peace.
Thanks, Celaroche.
See ya.
I got one question quick. I was just wondering, Admiral and Omni, which alliance do you think is going to be pose the most threat for your both alliances?
I'll go first. I think Baka is a big threat because they've already shown that they're coordinated and they know what they're doing, and they've already been attacking quite a bit of people. So they're going to be a threat all game, I think. Even from right now, we're keeping an eye on Baka. And then the Sing group for us is going to be competition. We're on the other side of the galaxy right now, so we don't expect to see them until the end game. But only one coalition could be number 1. So something's going to happen before the end of the game to decide who's number 1.
So it kind of like which one of you two work together to take out the third, and then who backstabs first.
I think it would be very interesting to get get everyone out of the woodworks and see what the political climate looks like amongst the alliances currently in the game and what coalitions they are tentatively in. I think that would be very interesting to see.
Can I follow up on that with another question?
Sure.
In terms of sector placement, would you say it is better to control a sector on the edge of the map, like having not as much others around, or in the center where you have like in every direction someone else?
Okay, Admiral, I know that your alliance had a big debate about this.
Oh,
Why
yeah.
don't you go first?
We spent hours debating this exact question. In the end, there are pros and cons to both sides. But in the end, we decided that being at an edge sector had a very slight advantage. But we are not totally sold on that. So we're finding out with this alpha.
What about you, Omni?
We started on the edge just by chance, really. We kind of just picked the sector that had 0 people after Sing went down. and we ended up on the edge.
Wait, did you wait for Sync to start first?
Well, no. Just by the time I logged in, Sync was already in, and I had seen Admiral's stream, so I kind of knew who they were, and I was like, nah, I don't want to go in there. So I would have preferred an inner circle. One of the things that we're doing, I'm kind of giving away some strategy here, but we're kind of positioning some of our military guys on the borders already. Not on the GTs just yet, but just in a position where the GTs are easier to reach and other sectors are a little easier to reach and defend and, you know, get your scan radius up. And I feel like being in the center, while you do have more people around you, at the end of the game, it doesn't really matter because everyone can get anywhere in 10 hours. But in terms of position for assaults and, you know, shorter range conflicts, from my perspective, it's a slight advantage to be in one of the inner spheres, or excuse me, inner sectors.
Okay.
Just because there's a little bit more room to expand. There are a couple more GTs in prime positions. Because, you know, for instance, we're on the edge, so someone has to go take the Grand Terrestrial on the edge of the map, and that base is effectively just useless. There's no one for them to raid other than out, you know, away from the edge.
But it's of course a little tiny useful that nobody's coming from 3 sides.
Yeah, I mean, that is one aspect, but if anyone, I mean, if you get attacked by 3 alliances at the same time, it doesn't matter if you're in an inner circle or an outer circle. You know, I feel like the alliances are going to try to work outwards first. So rather than going towards the center, I feel like the center is going to be like the final battleground. So you know, being in the center, you potentially have an advantage because I don't think you should attack a center for the reason of opening yourself up in the alliance warfare.
Just a question. As the leader of the main Libra alliance with the middle sector, how do you think Libra sector play out on the end game?
So what are your predictions for your own sector?
Yeah, I mean, everybody talked about the outer circle and the inner circle, but Libra is the middle one. There is a middle sector, right?
Yeah.
And how do you guys think the middle one, the battleground, plays out at the end?
If I'm asking, if I understand you correctly, you're asking them to make a prediction about how the Libra game will play out.
Yeah, because our sector is mainly, I mean.
Are you in Libra?
Yeah, I'm the leader of the big alliance there.
Okay.
So and that's a big question in our alliance, because we don't know, because the other sector we think is more defensive one, and the inner circle has like some attack advantage, but the middle one it's just us, and we are very concerned about it, and we don't know like if we defend a lot, if we start attacking or surveilling or.
Okay. Omni, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I don't think the war for the center sector will kick off until later. However, for the Libra sector, I would recommend, you know, strategically placing defensive bases that have good scan coverage over the entire sector. So try to position bases that, you know, you can get scanners up that cover the majority of the sector, so you have access to all movements coming from every direction. I think you're actually in an advantageous position, because what you can do in Libra, since you're in the center, is kind of secure just your safe GTs and just sit on them and build up your defenses. And once the, you know, top couple alliances start kicking off and going to war with each other, you can just sit and watch, and whoever you think is going to win, you approach them and say, hey, we think you're going to win, we'll work with you, and then help crush the third alliance. So basically you could just like sit and watch and, you know, bide your time and then expand from there once the wars are over.
Or the top alliances band together and crush you.
Yeah, that's a concern.
Or that, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
It's a political game, guys.
But Ian, I would definitely reach out to somebody in neighboring sectors, at least make friends. You don't need to make alliances right now, but make introductions.
Yeah, I have a question.
I'm here.
Yeah, there was a question.
Yeah, so what should like the smaller alliances and the smaller sectors be doing at this and towards the mid game?
Securing GTs. What do you say, Omni?
No, if you're a smaller alliance, here's the thing. Like, as this game progresses, people are going to inevitably fall out of playing. So just real life stuff, or maybe they burn out or whatever. This is a long game. So if you're a smaller alliance, the absolute best thing you could do is just to stay active. I wouldn't target a GT, because if you're a small alliance and you're holding a GT, you're now a target. But if you're a small alliance that's bunched up and building defenses and you're staying active, I don't think alliances are going to roll through and try to fight you if you're not controlling a GT. Now, you're like, you don't want to just play and build a base and then just have the game end, but as a small alliance, if you stay active to the end, you're going to be in a position where you could take the spot of another inactive group within one of the major coalitions. So even if you're small, you kind of have somewhat of an advantage in that you can kind of just focus on defense and your infrastructure, and then ride that to the end of the game. But if you're lacking in members, this is just from my perspective, then I wouldn't specifically target GTs, because, you know, for instance, if Crash to Desktop sees a small alliance holding 1 or 2 GTs, we'll probably just roll over you and claim those are.
What do you think, Admiral? You think being a small alliance that owns a GT has any advantages?
I think it's a loaded question. There are a lot of alternatives to consider. I think that, and I'm not trying to just be political here. I think to answer the question, small alliance would be best off by making friends with Big Brother, with a an understanding that as the inevitable players kind of drop out of the game, it's going to be more important to have friends and merge together with than enemies who, you know, it then becomes a game of attrition. Does my enemy lose their players quicker than I lose mine? So, you know, it's a game of friendship, ironically, and a game of PvP for the times where you really just don't want to be friends with that guy. Hoolish. In any case, you know, the political nature of the game really just, it really makes any real strategy viable. An early alliance, an alliance that has an early lead on a GT or 2 has a value to any other alliance. The real question then becomes is, are they willing to use that as a favorable negotiating term, rather than I'm going to hold this, I'm going to try to do my best to keep you from it. No. You know, it's kind of like, why do you're talking to a mafia boss. Do you really want him just to whack you? Or do you want to come to some negotiable terms, right?
Having a GT can be collateral in your pocket for a small to medium outlet. Something to offer.
So it feels like, you know, for me, if you're an active alliance, small alliance, and you have a GT, you should be perfectly be able to negotiate and have a big brother without having to relinquish what makes you valuable.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Like, if your alliance is going to specifically focus on 1 or 2 GTs and just defend those and say these are ours, we'll join whoever is friendly to us, then that is a viable strategy, because that's one less headache that, you know, I have to worry about personally. How do I manage those, you know, GTs myself when we want to be focusing on other targets? So that's a viable strategy.
What do you mean by sorry, go ahead.
So there is that option for especially casual players. Get that GT, hunker down, and just say what Omni said. Like, these are ours. If we will join anybody who is friendly towards us.
What do you mean by join? Like, who do I join?
Coalitions.
Okay.
So right now we have players, now we have alliances of players, and then later in the game, each sector is going to have a coalition, an alliance of alliances.
And later in the game we'll have alliance stations too at some.
Maybe one day.
And can anybody join the coalition? Like people from different sectors?
No, so the coalition leaders decide which alliances get to go into the coalition.
And the alliances have to be from the same sector, or can it be from a different sector?
They can be from a different sector.
Okay.
So does anybody else have more questions for the top two guys?
Yes, I have a question. It refers to the Alliance Station, since it has a stacking debuff that makes it so your defending fleets get weaker. How would you go around defending that?
So, do you guys have an opinion, Admiral Omni?
I'll let you know once we can build an Alliance Station.
I think it comes down to the political game. I think it comes down to having a strong imperialistic backbone. I think it comes down to the right Machiavellian players generating spy reports to identify strategies the enemy is potentially using. I think it's down to a little bit of luck. But in the end, a lot of your problems can go away if you just, utilize politics correctly and you make friends more than enemies. Which, it kind of sucks for some alliances who just seem to be the big bad wolf to everybody. It's kind of just a pain in the butt to deal with, but, in the end, that's all you can really do. Stack defenses, get some carding in there, prioritize, and hopefully take out the enemy before they take you out at the worst case scenario.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at is if someone does launch an attack on our Alliance Station, an actual attack, then we'll have to evaluate, is it worth defending versus are we going to have a bigger impact counterattacking immediately? So, that's something that you have to consider too regarding the Alliance Station. Maybe we'll sacrifice, some buildings on our Alliance Station in order to wipe out a couple bases and all the defenses of another player. And again, politics comes in big to this, because if we're getting attacked and if we have allies in other areas of the galaxy, then we might choose to defend and request that one of our allies in one of the other sectors launches an attack simultaneously against whoever's attacking us. So, politics is just as important as what you actually have.
All right.
Can I just make a general point, if I may?
Go ahead.
All the talks that we've been doing up till now have been how the individual players have built up their empires and got themselves going, etc. And what do the not so skilled players have to do to keep up with them? There's a much bigger skill that hasn't been considered, and that's none of us should be playing on our own. If you can have a super duper guy, but if you've got a good Imperial and a good Machiavellian backing up your hammer, the game changes dramatically.
I couldn't agree more.
Or if you've got an Imperial base that's your source of supply, as I said earlier, one of the functions for me of the Imperial player is to keep the battle losses replaced in the back line. He shouldn't be fighting. He should be making ships to give away, in my opinion. And if you can get that going with a good Machiavellian to help him, you defend him, you keep him going, and he keeps giving you ships, you can keep front line pretty much full up.
I would say the biggest aspect, or the biggest thing that any player can do while playing this game is to actually join the Discord and be active in your Alliance's Discord channel. If you have an Alliance and you don't have your own Discord, I would highly recommend making that, because even if you're a casual player, as long as you are able to coordinate with people when you're able to play, then that's the best thing that you could possibly do. Even if you're a complete noob and you have no idea what you're doing, as long as you can communicate and coordinate, it will take you, basically.
Yep. I 100% agree. Probably the most valuable thing you can do for yourself in this entire game is to coordinate with others on Discord.
Communicate, communicate, communicate.
Yeah, the most valuable thing in the game is actually something out of the game.
Yep.
If I might go on to the side a little bit, hey, the nose, you there, buddy?
Yep.
You're in this new interesting entity that is Baka.
Yes, I am.
And you guys are doing fabulously.
Yes, we're currently number 2 on the leaderboard on our main alliance.
So if you're willing to share, what are the long-term strategies for Baka? You've been pretty aggressive in your sector. You've attacked a lot of people. So how do you see that? Do you see that as impacting your future game at all?
The way we play might be a little bit different than the way you expect us to play. As for long-term goals, if we don't know what we're doing, then the enemy certainly won't be able to anticipate our future actions.
What a confident answer.
Very good, very good.
Great answer.
A kind of different question, maybe also in direction of the community manager. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, really. But do you think this state of mid-game is what you wish to be, or also to Admiral and Omni? Like, I have the feeling like some sectors, or like even the majority of sectors, is already settled without much fighting. Like, there's a dominant alliance and everyone else just basically falls in line.
So first of all, we are still in the early game. We haven't approached the middle game yet. The middle game will start when you start seeing capital ships flying around, when people start using them. And it's normal for people to try and use diplomatic ways to secure their position in any given sector. But it's not always possible, so sometimes you have wars. You know, Starborne is really, there's a bit of an elimination factor to it. If you join the game on your own and you don't make it into an alliance, you're not going to win the game. If your alliance doesn't make it into a coalition, you're not going to win the game. So there's these couple of cut-off points where people then, once we're in full production, can just join a new server.
So that actually brings up a actually very good point and question that wasn't really that I'd like to answer, which is, okay, I don't have any friends on here. I'm new to the game. What can I do? What's the best thing I can do to try to win the game? And that would be to try your best to join an alliance. If the alliance is full, try to come to some kind of agreement of non-aggression with the big brother next door. If that doesn't work, try and, well, I would say try and grab a GT, but that's pretty hard to do on your own now. So I would say position yourself in a place of value to potentially grab a GT once the enemy, the NPC station is destroyed, and you know, then and stay online. Just stay online, be active on Discord. Trust me when I say room will be made available for you. If you know, if you just log in and keep your queues consistent every day, your rank is going to go up. And a lot of us alliance leaders, we look very closely at your rank as well as your online time once you are logged in.
Yeah, we speaking for Crash Your Desktop, our rule is if someone is active in Fornax, we don't touch them. So if we see ships going to and from their base, we don't touch them at all. Because, you know, I understand that, as I mentioned earlier, people are going to leave, people are going to burn out. And if you're active, we want your help in our sector.
So there is a big incentive just to gobble up players just as long as they're active.
Yeah.
And willing is the key thing, because there were plenty of active players in Serpents, but I had to wipe them out because they were not willing, or at least their leader wasn't.
So if that's the deal, I might go and pay mind to your sectors and see who's not in alliance and active, and kind of subvert them to my cause first.
All right. Well, hey, on that note, I got to end the stream. Unfortunately, the wife beckons.
All right, Admiral. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yep. Take it easy, guys.
And thank you.
See ya.